She counted the exits before she greeted the first customer. 3 years of doing that, and it never stopped. Zendaya Bennett is an interpreter at one of Gangnam's most exclusive jewelry boutiques. Composed, precise, always ready to move. She is raising twin boys alone in Seoul, and someone once made very sure she understood what would happen if she stayed in one place too long. So she learned to be invisible. Then Kang Min-ho walks through the door, the silent tiger, president of Kangsung Group, the tiger tattoo running from shoulder to hand. He is here to buy a ring, for another woman, but he hears Zendaya's voice, and he stops. And then the boys run in. One of them looks up at Kang Min-ho with wide, light brown eyes, and asks a question no one in that boutique is ready for. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. The glass case needed polishing again. Zendaya dragged the chamois in slow circles, watching the entrance in the reflection. 4 years of running had taught her one thing. The door was always the first thing to know. She had changed cities 7 times. Different names, different hair, different schools for the boys. The threat that arrived at Jiwon and Jihoon's last school came as a photograph. The boys on the playground, circled in red marker, a single word written underneath. Found. She understood. She packed them that night, so she stopped running. She came back to Seoul and planted herself where anyone looking for Zendaya Bennett could find her. Real name on the employee register, real face in the boutique social media. A calculated exposure. The logic was cold. If they already knew where the boys were, then hiding was just dying slower. A client had left a clutch on the counter, the wrong shade of champagne for the necklace she was trying to sell. Zendaya moved it aside and redirected the woman's attention to the pendant. "The clasp is platinum," she said, switching mid-sentence to fluid Korean. "It will outlast everything in this room." The client bought it. They always did when Zendaya spoke with that register, low, certain, unhurried. A voice that had once translated UN briefings now sold 18-karat gold to Gangnam wives. She thought briefly about what she was doing with her life. 2 seconds. Then she let it go. Lunch was 15 minutes in the back office. She called Miss Park. Jihoon had bitten the classmate at recess. Jiwon, Miss Park reported with some confusion, had delivered a precise anatomical explanation of why biting was ineffective. "Split the difference," Zendaya said. She ate half a triangle of kimbap and went back to the floor. The afternoon light through the floor-to-ceiling windows shifted the shadows on the display cases. She registered this as information, angle, brightness, how much of the entrance it obscured. Always registering. It had become involuntary, the way breathing becomes involuntary. She smoothed the front of her burgundy dress and checked her reflection in the nearest case. The fitted cream blazer sat clean across her shoulders. Her hair, long coiled dark curls carrying threads of honey and chestnut, fell past her chest in disciplined abundance. Gold studs at her ears, nothing that caught the eye from the street. She had learned to dress to be remembered only by the people in front of her. The boutique had 2 marked exits. She had found 3 more. The building's service corridor led out onto a side street, where a right turn reached the Gangnam subway in 90 seconds. She knew this because she had walked it at different speeds, once with Jihoon on her hip. The boutique door opened. She knew before she turned. Something in the quality of the silence, the way her senior colleague Park Mi-yeon straightened at the far end of the floor, the way the first man through the door posted himself immediately to the right. 3 men entered. Then the woman, ivory dress, pearl earrings, the particular composure of someone performing ease. Then him. Tall. A tailored black suit that absorbed the afternoon light rather than reflecting it. Black dress shirt, no tie, collar loose at the throat. A steel watch on his right wrist. On his left arm, visible where the jacket sleeve had ridden up half an inch, the edge of a black tiger, ink so dense it read as shadow against light skin. Kang Min-ho stopped just past the threshold and looked at the room. Zendaya's hand found the edge of the display case. He had not changed. That was the specific injury. 4 years and he looked precisely the same. The angular jaw, the light brown eyes moving through a room the way a hand moves through still water, deliberate, testing depth. His eyes found hers. Neither spoke, neither moved. The woman in ivory, Han Soo-jin, the name the engagement announcement in last month's financial press had carried, touched his sleeve and said something Zendaya could not hear. His gaze stayed on hers. Then the door swung open again. Ji-hoon came through first, sneakers slapping marble, dark green shirt already untucked, talking before he cleared the entry. Ji-won followed at a half run, navy top, the small birthmark beside his right eyebrow catching the afternoon light. Their caretaker, Miss Park, appeared behind them, breathless and apologetic, and entirely too late. "Mommy!" Ji-hoon reached Zendaya's side and grabbed her hand. He looked up, saw the tall man standing very still near the entrance, and looked back at his mother. Then he looked at the man again, with the honest and merciless attention only a 3-year-old can sustain. Ji-won pressed against Zendaya's leg. He only watched. Min-ho's gaze dropped to the boys. He looked at Ji-won's face, the jaw, the slope of the cheekbone, the birthmark, then at Ji-hoon, then back. The calculation behind his light brown eyes ceased being a calculation. It became recognition, arriving like a blow absorbed in absolute stillness. Soo-jin looked from the boys to Min-ho. Her face held. That was worse than if it had broken. "Mommy," Ji-hoon said, pulling Zendaya's hand toward the man. "Why does that man look like us?" The question hung in the boutique silence like something that could not be unasked. Min-ho did not answer Ji-hoon. He looked at Zendaya instead, a long, unbroken look that passed over the boys and settled on her face like a door closing. She pulled both boys against her sides in a single motion. The other clients had already retreated toward the display cases, sensing something they couldn't name. The boutique manager appeared at the threshold to the back hall, read the room, and vanished. "We need to leave," Zendaya said to no one in particular. She moved for the front door. Min-ho stepped sideways, not aggressive, just there, filling the space between her and the street with the particular stillness of a man who has decided, "We're going to talk." His voice was low enough that only she heard it. "My sons are here." He glanced at Ji-hoon, still watching him with open curiosity, then at Ji-won, who had pressed his face into Zendaya's blazer. Something moved through Min-ho's expression, quick and unreadable. He looked back at her, then outside. She weighed it for 2 seconds. His men were already positioned near the entrance. She had clocked them the moment he walked in. The back exit would be watched. The boys were tired. Ji-won was already fisting the fabric at her waist. She leaned down and spoke to both of them quietly, switched to the soft voice she used for transitions. The junior staff member who handled client hospitality, a young woman named Yuna, materialized with practiced discretion and led the boys toward the lounge, where there were tablets and small wrapped candies they were absolutely not supposed to have before lunch. Zendaya straightened, walked past Min-ho to the door. Outside, the air was thick with August and exhaust. She stopped 2 paces from the entrance and turned to face him. Behind him, through the glass, she could see Ji-hoon accepting a candy from Yuna, and Ji-won sitting apart, watching the door. 4 years, Min-ho said. Someone was going to kill them. She said it flat, without decoration. Before they were born. Someone sent men to the apartment in Itaewon. I didn't know who to trust inside your circle, so I ran. He was very still. That's all I'm telling you here. She looked past him at the street, at the black vehicles she already knew were his. I won't say the rest until they're somewhere safe. Somewhere I can believe is safe. The silence stretched. Then he made a single gesture toward the lead car. She didn't move immediately. She looked at the vehicle, at the tinted windows, at the man holding the rear door open with professional blankness. 4 years of surviving alone had built something in her that no amount of trust could instantly dismantle. She went back inside for her sons. The estate sat behind walls in the hills north of the city, where the air changed and the traffic sounds died. Guards at the perimeter, cameras at angles designed not to be obvious, which made them more obvious to anyone who had spent 4 years learning to notice. The main house was older than she'd expected, stone and dark wood, not the cold glass architecture she associated with his offices. Ji-hoon walked up the front steps with his hands out from his sides, head swiveling. "Is this our house?" he asked. "No," Zendaya said. "It's big," he said, unbothered. Chi-won held her hand and said nothing. He watched the men near the gate the way small children watch unfamiliar dogs, not afraid precisely, but measuring. They were given rooms on the second floor, adjacent, connected by a shared bath. Zendaya noted the single window per room, the distance to the nearest staircase, the direction the hall turned. She noted it the way she had learned to note things, without appearing to. By the second evening, Ji-hoon had begun orbiting Min-ho. It happened without announcement. Min-ho was at the table in the main hall, reviewing documents, when Ji-hoon came in dragging a stuffed animal by one ear, and stopped at the edge of the table to stare at him. Min-ho looked up. "You have marks on your arm," Ji-hoon said. "I do." "Like a tiger?" "Yes." Ji-hoon considered this with the gravity unique to 3-year-olds processing something important. "I like tigers," he said, and climbed onto the chair across from Min-ho, as if the conversation were concluded, and he simply intended to stay. Min-ho let him stay. Zendaya stood at the hall entrance and watched. Ji-won appeared at her hip a moment later, having tracked her the way he always did. He looked at his brother, looked at Min-ho, tucked himself against her side, and stayed there. Min-ho's private investigators were not the men who reported to the council. He had separated them years ago for exactly this kind of work, plausibly deniable, loyal to him alone. They worked quickly when given parameters, and he had given them everything. The Itaewon apartment, the week she disappeared, every name in his circle who had known about the pregnancy. They brought him what they found on the 4th day. Intercepted messages, printed. Forged transfer records, designed to look like evidence she had been working for a rival. The kind of manufactured dossier that would have justified any action taken against her. Against the children. He recognized the architecture of it, the specific type of constructed evidence that left no clear origin. Then one of his men set down a tablet without speaking. The file was old, compressed, degraded at the edges. Zendaya on screen, her face rounder, her body unmistakably carrying the weight of late pregnancy. She was looking at someone off camera. Her hands were pressed together. "Please," she said on the recording, "please give him this. Tell him I didn't leave. Tell him someone is trying to separate us. Tell him—" A man's voice cut across her, short, 2 words, the kind spoken by someone who had just decided the recording had gone on long enough. Min-ho stopped the playback. He sat in the dark of his study and listened to the silence where the voice had been. He did not need to hear it again. 4 years of weekly meetings. A voice he had known since childhood, at every table, in every room where decisions were made. He set the tablet face down on the desk. The first alert came 11 minutes later. Not an alarm, the estate used silent signals, a red pulse on every secondary screen throughout the compound. Min-ho was already moving before his security chief spoke. Park Jin crossed the threshold without knocking, tablet in hand, face stripped of its usual composure. "Northeast perimeter. Someone cut the sensor feed from inside." Min-ho took the tablet. The camera grid showed 4 dark squares where feeds had been live 10 minutes ago. Whoever did it knew exactly which cameras to pull and in what sequence, the kind of knowledge that required time and access, not just proximity. Who had the rotation schedule? Park Jin's pause was answer enough. Lieutenant Yu submitted the updated layout to the outer team 3 days ago. Pak Jin set a second device on the desk, screen up. A message thread. Timestamps, coordinates, the estate's interior grid mapped in detail, sent from a number registered to one of Min-ho's own men. Min-ho did not touch the device. Where is Yu now? East Wing, we have him. He gave Pak Jin 2 words and walked. Yu Jin-sol was 31, 6 years in Min-ho's service, promoted twice. He sat in the corridor chair with his wrists zip-tied in front of him, eyes already resigned, the resignation of a man who had rehearsed this moment and decided he could survive it. He was wrong. Min-ho crouched in front of him. He kept his voice even. How long? 8 months. Yu's jaw moved. He approached me through an intermediary. I didn't know who it was until the 3rd meeting. What did you give him? Patrol schedules, entry protocols, the boutique arrangements. Yu's gaze dropped. All of it. The boutique. Min-ho stood. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not rage, something colder. He turned to Park Jin. Pull the surveillance on the Shin boutique encounter, full week prior. The footage came back in 4 minutes. It showed a woman in a dark coat entering the boutique 2 days before the incident, entering through the service entrance and spending 40 minutes in the back office. Long, straight black hair. The boutique manager shaking her hand. Soo-jin was still in the east sitting room under 2 of Min-ho's men when he walked in. She had been composed at dinner. She had been composed during the interrogation of Yu. She looked up now and held it for 3 seconds before her chin tilted down by a fraction, so small that anyone else would have missed it. The boutique, he said. She folded her hands in her lap. Min-ho, don't. The word was quiet. I have the footage. I have the manager's account. I have Yu's debrief. Tell me what you were actually paid to stage. Her composure fractured along a single line. Her bottom lip tightened, then released. Your father needed a controlled scenario. A meeting that would feel real to you, not arranged. She paused. I was supposed to make sure she came back into your orbit. That was all he told me. You knew about the boys. A longer pause. Yes. Min-ho turned and left without another word. He understood it now, the full geometry. Taehyun had not sent Soo-jin to prevent the reunion. He had engineered it. Bring the children forward. Give Min-ho something irreplaceable. Then threaten it. The leverage was never Zendaya. The leverage was 2 3-year-old boys who now had a father's face mapped to them, who had spent the previous night under this roof, who were somewhere in this compound right now. He took the stairs at pace. Ji-won and Ji-hoon were in the second guest suite, assigned, locked, 2 guards posted outside. He covered the corridor in 12 steps and opened the door. The room was empty. The beds were undisturbed. The small blanket Ji-hoon had dragged from the sofa was folded on the mattress edge. The window was latched from the inside. No sign of struggle, no indication of haste. Min-ho turned to the nearest guard, who was already pale. When did you last visual? 40 minutes ago, sir. Both boys were asleep. Miss Bennett was seated in the chair by the window. He said nothing. He walked back into the corridor and stood still for 4 seconds, long enough to think like her, not like a man hunting an intruder. She had not run. The window was locked. She had not called for help. She had not wanted his men to know where she was going. She had somewhere already chosen, selected before tonight, before the alert, the way someone marks a fire exit on the first week in a new building. Min-ho pulled the estate's architectural file from his own memory. He had built this compound. He knew every registered room, every corridor, every utility access. There was a utility corridor off the second sublevel that had been sealed during the renovation 4 years ago. Not demolished, sealed. The room at its end did not appear on the current floor plan because it had been reclassified as structural storage during the permit amendments. He took the service stairs alone. The door at the end of the corridor had no handle on the outside. It opened anyway when he pressed the upper left panel because someone had recently learned where the release catch was. The dark beyond it smelled faintly of concrete and the cedar from Ji-hoon's blanket, which was no longer on the bed upstairs. Min-ho stepped through. The room was small. One sealed window, no fixture light. The faint gray of the emergency strip along the baseboard the only source of illumination. Zendaya sat on the floor with her back against the far wall. Ji-won was asleep against her left side, fingers curled into her sleeve. Ji-hoon was across her lap, one fist tucked under his chin, breathing slow and even. She had the cedar blanket over both of them. She looked up when he entered. She did not move. Her eyes were steady. Not defiant, not relieved, the particular stillness of a person who has done this before, who knew exactly what she was doing and had simply been waiting to see how long it would take him to find her. Min-ho stood in the doorway. He looked at her, at the two boys asleep across her, at the room she had located on her own, at the locked door she had already figured out how to open, and understood, with no decoration or delay, what 4 years without him had actually produced. "You found it on day 2, he said. "Day 2, she confirmed. He stepped inside and let the door close behind him. Across the compound, his phone screen lit with a new alert, Dae-hyun's number on an incoming call, the first direct contact in 11 years. Min-ho let the call ring out, all 11 seconds of it. Then he set the phone face down on the table and walked to the door at the far end of the hall, the one that opened into the formal meeting room his father had used for councils. He made 2 calls of his own on the way. By the time he reached the room, 7 people were already moving. Mi-suk arrived last. She took her usual seat at the left corner without being asked and folded her hands in front of her. She had not been summoned to a full council in 3 years. She asked nothing. Min-ho placed a tablet at the center of the table. He pressed play. The recording was 42 seconds. Zendaya on screen, her hair loose, one hand pressed flat against her swollen stomach. She was speaking to someone off camera, her voice controlled but her eyes wide. "Please, tell him I didn't leave. Tell him someone is trying to separate us and I don't want to go." Then a door sound. Then Taehyun's voice, close to the microphone, saying her name once in a way that was not a greeting. The screen cut to black. No one at the table moved. Mi-suk's hands came apart. That was the only movement in the room, but Min-ho watched it the way you watch a door begin to open. He had never heard his mother's hands separate from each other at a council table, not once in 36 years. "That recording," Mi-suk said. "Where was it held?" Taehyun's archive. Soo-jin accessed it the night she contacted us. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. Mi-suk had spent 4 years believing her daughter-in-law had abandoned her son for money and convenience. She had believed it because Taehyun had given her a sequence of details that fit a pattern she already feared. She had believed it because she had wanted a reason to have been right about the match being wrong from the beginning. She understood now what she had enabled. Mi-suk reached into her jacket and set her own phone on the table. Taehyun has a private residence outside Incheon, 32 minutes from here. He uses a channel I set up for him in 2009. She looked at Min-ho directly. "I am converting that channel." She left the channel's history unspoken. She pulled up a second contact and spoke 3 names aloud, the heads of the families Taehyun had positioned against the Kang succession over the past 14 months. "Each of them owes me something that predates their alliance with him. I will collect now." She stood. "Give me 2 hours." She left the room before anyone responded. Min-ho's men reached the Incheon property in 31 minutes. Taehyun's fall was not dramatic. He had expected to negotiate. He had spent 11 years building contingencies, and every contingency assumed that Min-ho would act as a successor rather than as an opponent. The assumption had been wrong for longer than Taehyun realized. When the door came open, he was seated, still composed, the ring on his right hand catching the light. He did not reach for anything. There was nothing left to reach for. Soo-jin gave her formal statement the following morning. She had understood too late that she was never Dae-hyun's partner. She was a mechanism, built to be useful and discarded when the succession was settled. She said this without visible emotion, in precise sentences, while a council recorder sat across from her. She signed every page herself. Min-ho found Zendaya in a room near the East Garden. She was standing at the window, watching Ji-won and Ji-hoon in the courtyard below. Ji-hoon was attempting to convince Ji-won that a beetle he had found was a good pet. Ji-won was explaining, with the patience of someone who had already argued this question before, that it was not. Min-ho set a folder on the table near the door. "Legal documents," he said. "Full independence. Protection that operates under your authority, not mine. Equal standing in every decision that involves them." He nodded toward the window. No conditions attached to any of it. Zendaya turned from the window. She looked at the folder and then at him. He reached into his jacket and placed her original wedding ring beside the folder. The one she had left on the counter 4 years ago when she had walked out of a house she hadn't chosen to leave. "I'm not asking you to forget what happened," he said. "I'm asking for the chance to rebuild it. And if the answer is no, the documents stand either way." She did not answer immediately. She picked up the ring and held it in her palm without putting it on, and he understood that was exactly the right response. That she was not a woman who would give him a word before she had earned the right to mean it. Months later, Min-ho returned to the boutique in Gangnam. He arrived without an appointment. Ji-hoon walked beside him, stopping twice to look at things in cases. Ji-won stayed close to Min-ho's left side and said very little. The attendant set 3 trays on the glass counter. Min-ho looked at each one and chose a ring from the second tray. Small, plain setting. Nothing that announced itself. Ji-hoon looked up at him. "You should ask properly this time." Ji-won considered the ring for a moment. "You have to prove first that you won't disappear again." Min-ho put the ring in his coat pocket. He drove home. Zendaya was in the kitchen when he came through the door, and she looked at him the way she had looked at the ring that afternoon in the East Garden, measuring the weight of what she was holding before she decided what to do with it. He met her eyes and held them. That was where it started. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. What would you do if the man you spent years running from walked through your door to buy a ring for someone else? And if a small birthmark beside a child's eye told him everything you never said, would you have found the courage to finally stop? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about hidden paternity, betrayal, and redemption, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.